It is important not only for doctrinal orientation, but also in regard to the world of action, that the men of the new group precisely recognize the chain of causes and effects and the essential continuity of the current that has given life to the various political forms that are jousting today in the chaos of parties. Liberalism, then democracy, then socialism, then radicalism, and finally communism and Bolshevism only appeared historically as steps taken by the same evil as stages in which each one prepares the next in the complex unity of a process of decline. The beginning of this process is the point at which Western man shattered the fetters of tradition, rejected every superior symbol of authority and sovereignty, claimed a vain and illusory but liberty for himself as an individual, and became an atom instead of a conscious part of the organic and hierarchical unity of a whole. In the end, the atom was bound to find that the mass of the other atoms, the other individuals, had turned against him, and he was dragged into the plight of the kingdom of quantity, of pure number, of masses that are given over completely to materialism and who have no other god than the sovereign economy. In this process, there is no stopping halfway down the road. Without the French Revolution and liberalism, there would have been no constitutionalism and democracy. Without democracy, there would have been no socialism and demagogic nationalism. Without the preparation of socialism, there would have been no radicalism and finally communism. The fact that today we see these different forms frequently together or in opposition should not prevent an eye that sees clearly from recognizing that they belong together. They are linked, they condition one another in turn, and they express only the different steps of the same current, the same subversion of every normal and legitimate social ordering. The great illusion of our days is that democracy and liberalism are the antithesis of communism, and have the power to stem the tide of the forces of the low, what is called the progressive movement in the jargon of the labour unions. This illusion is like saying that dusk is the antithesis of night, that an illness's incipient stage is the antithesis of its acute and endemic stage, or that a diluted poison is the antithesis of the same poison in its pure and concentrated state. The men in the government of this liberated Italy have learned nothing from the recent past, although its lessons are repeated everywhere monotonously. They continue their pitiful game with political conceptions that are out of date and empty in the parliamentary Mardi Gras, this danse macabre on a dormant volcano. What is in our possession is the courage of radicalism, the no spoken to political decadence in all its forms, both of the left and of the supposed right. And we must be especially aware of this, that there is no negotiating with subversion, and that concessions made today mean condemning ourselves to being completely overwhelmed tomorrow. We therefore insist on an intransigence of the idea, and a readiness to advance with pure forces when the right moment arrives. Naturally, this also implies ridding ourselves of ideological distortion, which unfortunately is widespread even in some of our young people. It is because of this that they concede some of the excuses for the destructions that have already taken place, deluding themselves with thinking that after all they were necessary and will serve the cause of progress, that we should be fighting for something new awaiting us in a definite future, instead of for truths that we already possess. This is because, always and everywhere, although these truths appear in different forms, they have been foundation for every correct type of social and political organization. Young people need to reject these fads and whims. We should learn to laugh at people who call us on the wrong side of history, or reactionaries. There is no such thing as history. This mysterious entity with a capital H. Men make and unmake history, provided they are really men. What is called the course of history is more or less the same thing as what is called progressivism in left-wing circles. And it aims at only one thing today, to foment passivity in the face of the current that is getting stronger and carries us continually lower. As to the charge of reactionary, ask them the following question. While you are acting, destroying, and profaning, do you then want us not to react, but to stand by passively watching, or maybe even shouting, "Good work, keep it up"? We are not reactionaries only because the word is not strong enough, and especially because we start from what is positive and we represent what is positive. Values that are real and original, and we do not need the light of any son of the future. In the face of our radicalism, in particular, the antithesis between the Red East and the Democratic West appears irrelevant. An eventual armed conflict between these two blocs appears to us even more tragically irrelevant. If we look only at the immediate future, the choice of the lesser evil is certainly a reality because the military victory of the East would imply the immediate physical destruction of the last representatives of our resistance. But from this point of view of the idea that inspires them, Russia and North America can be considered as two tongs of the same pincers that are tightening definitively around Europe. In them we see the same foreign and hostile force, acting in different converging forms. The forms of standardization, conformism, democratic leveling, frantic overproduction, the more or less arrogant and explicit cult of the expert brain trust, and the petty materialism of Americanism can only clear the road for the final phase, which is represented in the same direction by the communist ideal of the mass man. The distinctive trait of Americanism is that the attack on quality and personality is not accomplished by means of the brutal coercion of a Marxist dictatorship and the care of the state, but takes place almost spontaneously by means of a civilization that does not recognize ideals higher than wealth, consumption, profit, and unchecked economic growth, an exaggeration and reductio ad absurdum of what Europe herself has chosen. This is what the same motives have created there or are in the process of creating. On both sides we see the same primitivism, mechanical reductionism, and brutality. In a certain sense, Americanism is for us more dangerous than communism, because it is essentially a kind of Trojan horse. When the attack against those values of European tradition which yet survive are found in the direct and naked form that belongs to the Bolshevik ideology and Stalinism, it still provokes some reaction and certain lines of resistance, even if weak ones, can be maintained. Things are different when the same evil acts in a subtler manner, and the transformations take place insensibly on the level of custom and a general worldview, as is with the case of Americanism. By thoughtlessly submitting to the influence of Americanism under the flag of democracy, Europe is already predisposed to the ultimate abdication, and this could come about without the need for military catastrophe. But more or less the same point could be reached in a progressive fashion rather than a final social crisis. Again, there is no stopping halfway down the slope. Americanism, willy-nilly, is working for the ostensible enemy, collectivism.